Carolina walked into Rupp Arena on Wednesday night like they were checking the thermostat. Just calmly walked in, took the temperature, and left with the whole building feeling confused. Tonight, well, Georgetown tried to play spoiler in Chapel Hill, but Carolina treated them exactly the way they should have. Treated it like a business meeting. No drama, no chaos, no need for a court summons, just an 81-61 reminder that handling your business is a sign of maturity. Two games, two very, very different tests, but two results that tell us this team might be figuring out who they want to be. I'm Joey Powell. This is the Coast to Coast. Let's get it. What's happening, everybody? Joey Powell, the Coast to Coast from InsideCarolina.com, part of the On3 Network. Make sure that you join if you have not. I think it's $1 right now if you want to be a premium subscriber. Shout out to everybody who was watching the post game. If you did not stick around after the post game, man, I'm judging you a little bit. I know Tommy and Hayden Rob Harrington have probably gotten all the meat off of the post game immediately, but we got a little bit more that we want to dive into here because North Carolina had a 2-0 week. I think there's a lot to dig into. They literally just beat Georgetown by 20, and they were only favored by about a dozen. That game kind of felt like a handle your business assignment after that emotional high from winning at Rupp on Wednesday, but two different kinds of challenges, and Tar Heels walked out 2-0. We got a ton to get into. We're brought to you by Johnny T-Shirt. Sherrell, you watched the same thing we watched. What was the first thing you took away from this Georgetown win?
It was a weird one because I felt like Carolina's defense was good and I felt like it was bad all at the same time. So it was unique in that respect. But besides that, like you said, they kind of did what you're supposed to do against a non-conference opponent who's not great, but also has the capability of beating you. Those are usually the most dangerous ones where they can pose a threat if they're really playing well. So they handle business, like you said. But yeah, I want to talk to Sean. I want to talk to you. I want to talk to Rob. I want to talk to Adrian, Trevor, and Greg about the defense because I don't know. The eye test says it's good at times, but then you look at points in the paint, and I think between Georgetown and Kentucky, they allowed like 76, almost 80 points in the paint in those two games. So it's like, how can you reconcile the fact that they're playing what feels like decent defense? They held Kentucky for what, 12 minutes without a field goal. Georgetown was abysmal in the second half offensively, and yet they're giving up 74 points in the paint. So I'm trying to marry those two and figure out exactly what's going on. But those are my major takeaways: is that they won two games that they absolutely needed to win. It shows maturity, shows growth, shows the ability to overcome some bad things. And then I'm wondering about what's really going on with the interior defense because at times it looks amazing, like one of the best in the country, and then the other times guys are just going in for layups. So I don't have an answer, but that's the first things that popped in my head.
Yeah, I like that you went to defense first because Sean and I were talking about off the air just some of the laziness on offense, but if you've got two post players like Wilson and Vasar that are doing what they're doing, it's gonna cover a lot of ills. But I agree with you, especially against Kentucky. They really got abused in the paint early on. Sean, I want to ask you, both games, what are you seeing stylistically or statistically that might make you think that these improvements are legitimate?
Offensively or defensively?
Dealer's choice, man.
Well, let's go offensively because I think that's where, if you look at the rankings in the rank in the 40s offensively, I think probably from the preseason, if we had to pick one, I think we all probably would have thought their offense would be at least in the 20s, if not higher, given some of the versatility that they did have. Looking at the Kentucky game, offense was, it wasn't much to be found, but they did make a lot of key baskets. And Georgetown, they were able to improve that, getting back from a points per possession, their best game in their last three. I think I know we'll talk about Dixon But I do think what we saw in Georgetown, some of the lineups that they utilized for longer stretches, to me, from an offensive standpoint, could make them a little more dangerous. And I think having the next few games to continue to experiment with those, then you're going to have Seth Trimble coming back. But when you have Dixon, Evans, and Bogovats on the floor at the same time, paired with Wilson and Vasar, it provides a legit five scoring threats. And given the struggles we've seen from Evans and maybe the difficulty in getting clean open shots up from three, I do like him being paired with Dixon at times, just for them to play off of each other. And when you add Bogovats, kind of three scorers from the wing. So we did get to see that in the first half and second half against Georgetown. Now, obviously, with that, you're going to be giving up some on the defensive end from a size and length, especially when you're taking Stevenson out. But when you're looking at that Georgetown first half, you felt like they could have been up 10 with a few, some of Powell's threes went down or a few things here or there, but it was still a game, and they were able to push it out, get to 80 points. But Kentucky, which I know we'll go into more, there's a lot of struggles. And now that was on the road, probably the win, seeing what Gonzaga did, Kentucky might look a little different. But from a Georgetown perspective, I think there's a little more consistency, and the guards are able to take a little more pressure off of the bigs, who continue to have great games all around.
Yeah, you made a comment about Jonathan Powell, and I felt for that kid in the first half of the Georgetown game, because I felt like he had every single part of the rim and the affixed stanchion and the backboard and just couldn't get one to drop. But as we always know, shooters shoot, and he kept shooting and finally found a mid-range and then hit a three later in the game. Sean, I feel like individuals on this team are starting to figure out their roles a little better. One of the biggest qualms with last year's roster was I don't know that guys knew their roles until like February. But because Hubert Davis is playing some different lineups and playing some weird combinations and some guys that make you scratch your head a little bit when you see him out there together, I think you're finding some things that might work in situational stuff in the future. Do you feel like that the fact he's using his bench right now is making individual players better and thus making the team better as a unit?
Well, from a bench perspective, I think still not a very, very deep team, even though Powell didn't play great today. Obviously, he brings shooting. I think we've seen what happens when he attacks the rim. It hasn't ended well, but I've loved what he has brought from an offensive rebounding perspective, and that was really the reason they won the game against Kentucky as a team, what they were bringing from an offensive rebounding perspective to create those second and third chance opportunities. So the continued emergence of what he's bringing. But in terms of, I'm going to stay with the starters, because I do think they've been able to push the right buttons when needed. Of Bogovats, who I'm still waiting for him to, I think, fully get immersed and come to be the player that we think he can, coming out of the Adriatic League offensively, and show that consistency. From a three-point perspective, we're starting to see it, and he's been able to have some crafty moves around the basket. But go against the Kentucky game, he hit some big shots. And then you have Dixon, who started to emerge, double figures tonight, obviously the big 5 points against Kentucky. And he brings that size and almost a veteran leadership to him, even though he is a freshman, just from the poise on the court. And then when you see the timeouts or the huddles, you have, whether Dixon's in the game or Evans, they're the most vocal of players. And then Vasar, you can see his frustration shine through a lot during the game. But I think that shows his passion. So between the big and then the guards talking it up a lot, I think that's been a good sign. But going back to the roles, last year, I think one of the main issues was people probably wanted roles that other players had, or roles that they saw for themselves versus what the coaches saw. This year, I think people are starting to figure it out, especially with Henry and Caleb being the alphas and the dominant ones in the front court. Jaren offering still want to see more consistently from him, which he had been giving up, I'd say through this Georgetown game. Still trying to figure out Evans, but I think the more that he can play with Dixon or with Trimble a little bit, and maybe recalibrate expectations for him, if you're looking at at it between him and Dixon. But Dixon, what we're seeing now, I think he's still going to grow a lot. So there's still going to be some ups and downs with him, but his roles, I think, is probably the most, between him and Bogovat's the one that will evolve the most from the guard perspective.
Sherrell, when I'm thinking about the game at Kentucky, I saw a team that didn't look like a squad that was just happy to be there. It looked like a team that expected to win, especially down the stretch. The poise was really, really important. And the shot selection was very grown up. Defensively, I think they made Kentucky work a little more probably than Kentucky wanted to. I don't think Kentucky's that poor of a shooting team, or at least I didn't. Then I watched the first half of the Gonzaga game. They couldn't throw it in the ocean if they were sitting in a boat. But specifically around the poise, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little more, and Sean was getting there, about Derek Dixon. We have dubbed him on this show that he's Sade because he's such a smooth operator. He can start using Rick Rude's old interest music if he wants to. But I really appreciate how he's let his confidence kind of grow as he's grown into this team. So with his poise in Rupp the other night, and then you saw more of that confidence tonight, he just seems to really be unflappable. Can you explain to us what you saw and what we talked about a little bit about him playing in the DMV and playing some really good competition, how that has translated into this, Christmas time starting to click that we've seen before from some North Carolina freshman guards?
I would say you become what you work on. You become, what is it? You are what you emphasize, I think is the famous Jason Staples phrase. And Dixon has always emphasized like never being too high, never being too low, always making the right play, kind of a laser focus on doing what's right in the exact moment, at the exact time, and being prepared for whatever is to come. So I think you see that coming through, especially in that Kentucky game, again against Georgetown tonight. You see it coming through, and it really backs up what the buzz was coming out of Chapel Hill over the summer. I mean, we've all talked to people around the program, former players, people who got to watch practices and scrimmages, and it was pretty clear that Derek Dixon was going to be a major piece because they all kept coming back and talking about him and expecting him to do big things. And when it didn't happen, I guess those first 3 or 4 games, it was like, well, maybe they overinflated, maybe they like their players better when they're playing against each other, that kind of thing. But it turns out that it just took a little bit. And he still is a freshman. It's only his 9th college game, believe it or not. And we see what Caleb Wilson is doing, and I think people kind of apply that to other freshmen and say, well, why can't he do it that quickly? But it is a mixture of how he is trained, his high school competition, and his AAU competition. And again, when you're talking about like rankings and all that stuff, well, you look at him and you say, wow, he was only top 50. Why is he doing this, that well? We're got to remember, and I'm going to keep saying this over and over, rankings are about the NBA draft, not about how well they're going to play in college. That's the difference. And I think anyone who scouted him or watched him knew that he was going to be someone who could make an immediate impact because of what you said, Joey. He's so smooth, so unflappable, just is able to do the right thing at the right time. So it all comes through, I think, from his preparation with his trainers, how he's always played, and then playing against really good competition all these years, both in the high school level and the AAU level.
He's fun to watch, especially if you've watched Carolina for a long time and you understand what good freshman lead guards have looked like for them. Sean, we've talked ad nauseum about, is this a good shooting team from the perimeter? Is this team a team that has a bunch of good shooters? Because I think those two things are different. You could have good shooters and not be a good shooting team. I think they've done just enough this week that their perimeter game obviously helped them get 2 wins. But how much of that is just having a guy like Derek Dixon in the game to take some threes? Because clearly he's got a very, very clean release. He feels confident in his shot. I'm going to read his line really quick from the Georgetown game. In 27 minutes, he went 5 for 7 from the field, 3 for 5 from behind the arc. And as North Carolina continues to try to find their footing, and they've shown their willingness to shoot, 25, 28 threes a game, they're starting to get to our magic number of 8, and I think against Georgetown they may have actually been up to 9 or 10, who knows? But I think that when you have good perimeter shooters taking those shots, it's got to help the team's overall number, and then it's got to help them shoot better when they see their teammates hitting it, right?
Well, it's funny you bring that up. So right now he's shooting 12 of 25, and that number is not going to stay as high as it is, but he did shoot 38% in AAU. So he's proven he can shoot at a high level. And I think when you go back to the Kentucky game, I'd be curious how many people felt confident when he went to take that 3-pointer. I know I did, just from his presence and how he's how his shot has looked so far. But when you take out him and Vasar, also he's made a leap in a much smaller level. But I think that's, to me, one of the big question marks is, can this team get to a decent to solid 3-point shooting team? Because you look right down the line, you have Stevenson, who's not afraid to fire threes. He's at 22%. Then you have Powell, Bogovats, Evans. Those were supposed to be the guys that were coming in to shoot, and they're all below 33%. So right now you only have 2 guys above 35% from 3, which is dangerous, as we know. If you're getting to 8 or 9, but you're needing 30 shots to do it, then it kind of unbalances the scale. So it's nice that Vasar and Dixon's come along from that 3-point perspective, because we know you need to make threes to be able to win games these days. Threes and offensive rebounds. So the big question is, can the other guys start to come along? It's been, I think we've been saying that every week. Powell's shot looks good. I hate it when he's in the corner and he's always fading and kicking his leg up. I think if he could just go a little bit more straighter up, straight down, he's probably the one I'm the most confident in turning around. Bogovats, we were talking earlier, sometimes it does feel like he gets sped up. Sometimes it feels like his release point is a little different, a little quick. But I think he has the confidence that he can take and make big shots. And then obviously Evans is the big question mark right now. But when you look at the team, 3-point shooting is definitely dragging them down. And I think to become a strong tournament team in ACC play, they're going to need some of those guys to step up and get above 35%. And at the same time, we saw the 6 points in a row from Vasar and Stevenson, what a difference that does to open up the game a little bit more. 6 quick points. So if they can continue just to hit shots consistently, especially from 3, I think some of these runs that they're starting to go on but not really finishing off can really start to get to those 6-0, 8-0, 10-0 runs that can push the games open a little quicker.
Everybody's friend Lake Rosenberg in the chat shared the Ken Pom 3-point percentage as of right now, which puts North Carolina at 234th. And he makes a great comment. I actually like this. If North Carolina can get to the mid 150s, then that should make a significant difference. And I think he's right. We've talked about Trimble coming back, and I don't know that Trimble's shooting necessarily helps that number, though he can, hit the occasional 3. But I do think that his ability to drive and kick will help with that. If nothing else, just creating cleaner and more open looks from the perimeter. Sherrell, we've talked so much about how this team looks like vintage North Carolina teams, not just because they have, 2 traditional post players, or just because they're a bigger team, but I feel like the way that they play is reminiscent of some North Carolina teams of the, of the 90s. Even if you just look at the stature on that back line, I said a few weeks ago that North Carolina's front court might be the best in the nation, and I hadn't seen a ton of teams yet. I'm starting to see more of other teams, post players, and I think I'm going to dig my heels in a little bit more and say I think North Carolina might actually have the best front court in the nation. And you look at me and you might say, well, Joey Jaren Stevenson doesn't provide anything offensively. He does some, but I swear when you add in his on-ball defense and his ability to defend the perimeter with the 2 other guys that are playing on the back line with him, man, that's a hell of a recipe. Sherrell, what excites you the most about what you've seen so far from Caleb Wilson and Henry Vasar? Is it the fact that they've had this production consistently? It's a fact that they've start, protecting the rim a little bit. What's the biggest just holy crap feeling that you're getting from this front line as we talk, 9 games into the season?
I think it's just an athleticism and an ability to finish that Carolina hasn't had in some time. I remember really dating back like 3 or 4 years. It was like every year I'd say, "Oh yeah, these guys are coming in. They're athletic. They're going to be able to help Carolina finish because that's been an issue." And then it didn't happen. And then you get into the years with Baycott and Ingram, and while those guys were great players, they weren't ones who would jump over you and dunk on you. And so I think that level of dynamism, if that's a word, of just the ability to jump over people and dunk, that's been missing. And I mean, how many times did we see missed layups over the last 5 years where it's like, man, if he could have just dunked that, it's probably 4 or 5 points a game that Carolina lost from just missed layups or not being able to finish through contact, not be able to draw extra foul. So I think that's to me is one of the big things is just their ability to finish. Um, as far as the front court is concerned, praise Jaron Stevenson all season. And now I'm like kind of walking it back a little bit because while the three was nice, it's like there's got to be something else that he hangs his hat on. And I know that we're all going to say, well, he's a good defender. Yes, that's true. But if you're going to be out there in a rotation at 7 guys, you're going to have to give a little more from a rebounding perspective and eventually a scoring perspective. And it would take a lot of a load off of Wilson and Vesar because what I'm wondering now is like, okay, those 2 guys are great. I think I probably would agree with you. They might be the best 5-4 combo in the country. But it's like, can they do this for another 20 games in the ACC, playing 37 and 38 minutes a night?
Yeah.
That's the worry because right now it's great. But what happens if there's a tweaked ankle, or what happens if
Yeah.
we've seen, one of them gets in foul trouble. So I do think it's a great front court. I do think the way they finish has helped a ton, but I'm like, I don't know, some like flashing lights are going off because it's so good. When things are going so well at certain places, you're like, okay, the other shoe's about to drop. Something bad's about to
It's,
happen.
it's kick
That
dog syndrome, man. We've
yeah,
all got it.
yeah. So to answer your question, that's what I think it is, the way they finish, and the way they are able to play together. Because you know, Wilson is almost more of the post player in kind of an inverted 5-4 with those two. And the way that they're able to pass back and forth, and then Vasar can pop out and hit threes, it just works so seamlessly together well.
I know we talked when Vasar committed to North Carolina. Kind of think we had some questions about is he going to be able to translate his usage rate to a lot larger share of the minutes? And like you said, 36 and 37 a game is a lot. I do hope that this next home stretch against some inferior opponents will allow Hubert Davis to sit him a little bit. And I know they've got a few days off for exams coming up, but uh, I don't think anybody expected him to be as dominant as he's been on the glass. One of the knocks was that he never had but a handful of double doubles, and he's basically been a double double machine so far against teams that have decent post players.
Let me jump in, Joey. And so we have to give credit where credit is due because we bang on Hubert Davis when things don't go well, but this is the second transfer, really the third transfer. If you consider Brady Manick, Harrison Ingram, and now Vesar, who didn't have a reputation really as rebounders prior to getting to UNC, and then they get to UNC and they're rebounding their tail off. So I think that has to be something that is emphasized by Hubert Davis and that he makes sure comes through with those guys. Because that was it. I guess this could be an answer to the question too. We were all worried about rebounding because those are tall, athletic guys, but they're not big, relatively strong, compared to these fourth and fifth and 6-year seniors in some cases. So the worry was, will they be able to go in there and rebound against these bigger, girthier teams? And I mean, they've owned the glass for most part. I think Carolina's, in the top 10 in rebounding pretty much in every category. So that's been a pleasant surprise.
I mean, definitely different from BYU, where some of those challenges were seen. I mean, I think Henry, we all knew from an offensive rebounding perspective, could be there, but I've liked how he's used his length, and Wilson has used his athleticism just to aggressively snatch the rebounds down, or Vasar has been able to use his body just to get good rebounding position, and then be able to use his length to make sure he captures it. And I think there have been times where you've seen one or two guys try to get in there, and he's been able to make sure that he's not losing the ball afterwards. So you've seen his defensive rebounding percentage increase and his offensive rebounding percentage dip slightly, but he's still a force with that size.
Yeah, I'm seeing some folks in the chat as we got talking about the front court and Caleb Wilson. I've seen some folks saying that he's not ready. His game isn't ready for the NBA, and I've said it before. I will say it again. Enjoy the few months that he is here, because he is absolutely ready for the NBA. You saw again this week how incredibly good his mid-range game is. That fall away and his little turnaround. I don't know if that shot's blockable. I really don't think it is. And he's so confident taking it. So yeah, just enjoy watching Caleb Wilson for however many games North Carolina has him, because he is a one-of-one type player. And, don't get ahead of yourself wishing him back in Chapel Hill. Him going to the NBA and being a lottery pick will be great for this program. Sean, I've seen, even in the first half against Georgetown and some against Kentucky, now that he's starting to see double teams, I'm seeing Caleb Wilson maybe not have the flash that he had earlier in the season. Part of that is against, level and experience of competition. But I've been impressed with how he's been able to maintain his effect on the game, even, if it's stuff of chasing his own shots or maintaining a presence on the offensive glass, even when he's not, ripping the rim off every few seconds like he did for a while. He still seems to be positively affecting this team. What do you like most about what he's doing when he's not scoring?
Well, I think coming in, we all knew that 3-point shooting was a weakness. And for me, probably put a little too much emphasis on that. And right now he's shooting 18% from three. So it's not like he's shown that aspect of his game. So normally you say, hey, okay, stretch, a 4, let's just play off of him, like we've seen in other teams, and clog the paint. And to his credit, one, he'll take 1 or 2 threes a game, right? But he's not letting that determine what he's going to do. So I love his aggressiveness. I think as you said, his mid-range game was probably underrated, but whether it's the catch and shoot or the fadeaway, that's not bouncing around the rim. That's just pure straight through the net swish. So it's a really strong weapon. And really, since the Michigan State game, you started to see the double teams coming. People play him for his spin move. I think when you've last week read 2 NBA draft articles that highlighted his lack of conversions at the rim for non-dunks, which I think there's something to look at, and maybe there's not sometimes the vertical explosion you might expect, but at the same time, you have to factor those dunks in there. And when you do look at what he is taking, they're very challenged and tough shots because he is so aggressive. So I think he's not letting the opponent dictate what he's going to do. And he's able to continue to make such an impact by being aggressive, hitting the mid-range, getting offensive rebounds, getting out in transition, using his athleticism. And the game plan that opponents have will only continue to increase of how they're going to play him or his go-to moves, or how they want to pressure his mid-range. But I think just his calm, collected demeanor mixed in with that aggressiveness will continue to help. And even just over the last week, I think one of my concerns coming out of Fort Myers was sometimes it felt like he was being too deliberate with the ball, going one-on-one, or kind of a ball stopper, to be honest. And I think what we saw this week was he's able to take what the defense has given him. His processing speed has already improved, and now he's able to attack or kick out. But he's moving even quicker mentally than he was, which was already at a pretty fast speed.
Sherrell, there were times it's been somewhat of a moniker off and on for quite a while. Some people just think that like Carolina basketball is just, I don't know if it's the color or players or what, but people have thought Carolina's like soft as elevator music, like just really, really not strong with the ball, not intimidating, none of that stuff. Has North Carolina changed that 9 games into a season? Because they've played against some teams that had some real junkyard dogs against them. Michigan State being one of them. And I realize that Michigan State won the game, but North Carolina was in that and showed like they were ready to fight. I think hearing Hubert Davis over, his tenure at North Carolina, he always talks about the fact that he wants to bring the fight to somebody. Has North Carolina changed that mainly on the backs of guys like Vasar and Wilson?
Well, I think that perception is a little outdated. I think it dates back to how UNC was so efficient offensively that maybe they didn't have to yuck it up and play that way because they were going to score, 1.25 points per possession. They were going to have 85 points at the end of the game, and you were going to hope that you could be close. And when that happens, and you don't have to do those things that teams with lesser talent have to do, then you get that moniker of, oh, they're soft, they don't want to battle. And it's like, no, they're just more skilled and better. So I think it's kind of a misnomer that that whole perception got painted on them for so long. But I do think North Carolina has shown that it's a tough team. I mean, you whether or not Kentucky is terrible or not is immaterial. If you go into Rupp and you're able to hold them without a field goal for the better part of the majority of a half and still find a way to win, that's tough. Michigan State is probably a little tougher right now. I think we saw that in the game over Thanksgiving, a little tougher with a little more athleticism. And then again tonight, I mean, if for those who weren't in the Smith Center, if you're listening to the broadcast, our guy, Corey Alexander, said over and over and over again how Ed Cooley wanted to make this like a fight and he wanted to slow it down and like beat up on Carolina, et cetera, et cetera. What happened was Carolina grinded Georgetown down over the course of the game towards the end where they had nothing left. So I think the results of the games show that they are definitely a tough team. And Caleb Wilson and Vasar are a huge part of that because, Caleb, I was going to say he doesn't suffer fools well, but he is explosive. And then the way he plays and the way he drives and the way he rebounds, all that is toughness. And I don't want to get started on my rant about what toughness is and what it isn't, but everything he displays and everything Vesar have displayed has really shown toughness. And then if you want to go even further, someone like Derek Dixon, that's the ultimate mental toughness to, be on the bench and then come in and hit a step back three and get a layup to win the game at Rupp Arena. That's what mental toughness really is. And I think they've shown it. So it's a good sign. You can't really complain about 8-1 with the way they've done it so far. There's some things that they have to work on. But yeah, I think that perception's out of date.
I know there are two brothers on a staff at a school in Pennsylvania that might not really want the smoke that they've talked about in the past against this North Carolina team. At least maybe not from this roster.
They got to worry about Hofstra first.
They got housed by Hofstra, so yeah, you worry about that first. But we'll get to that at some point later in the season. Sean, we've seen from these two games, if you put them both together, you saw a heavyweight fight at Rupp and the maturity test against Georgetown. And I think we're starting to see a team that's got a couple of faces of identity. We've talked about that a lot with the football team on Inside Carolina Live, but with this, I've seen a team that's shown they might be able to win fast. They've shown they might be able to win ugly. They've shown that they can win on the road in a rough environment, which is crazy because that was their first true road game was at Rupp. And they've shown they can handle a little bit of an emotional hangover and have a business-like win against what I think is a tournament, quality Georgetown team. That's what good teams do, not just teams that have talent, but good teams. When you look at the trends of this squad, Sean, whether it's efficiency or turnovers or spacing or what have you, what do you feel like is pointing upward the fastest?
What is pointing upward the fastest? Well, to me, I'd say the biggest trend is offensive rebounding, just because that allows you to play all those different styles. And I think we talked about it a lot last year, where before they went on their winning streak, and really throughout Hubert's tenure, the offensive rebounding has never been where it was in the Roy Williams era. And now part of that was style and scheme, things of that nature. But especially when you have a team that is not a great shooting team, as we saw last year, and you're not adding those extra possessions or extra opportunities to, for field goal attempts, it can be a long game. And I think for them this year, of whether it's in Kentucky and getting the 20 plus offensive rebounds, today against Georgetown was probably their, I think, lowest amount of offensive rebounds, but that helps you play all those different styles. And one of the things I was going to bring up later, just from a tempo, this is, I believe, the slowest tempo team since the Bill Guthridge days right now. And I think that's an area, especially as Dixon continues to get more involved, of how can they continue to put more pressure offensively. But to be able to play those styles and in those different environments goes to the offensive rebounding ability, to me, and one, creating those extra shot attempts. So I think early on, especially, let's just go back a week, right? We were probably in our minds thinking, okay, out of these top 4 games or top 5 games, 2-2 or 3-2 is what they'll be, thinking Kentucky was going to be a loss. And there was opportunities, Kentucky getting up 6 at different points in that second half where it could have turned ugly pretty quickly, with a few made shots on Kentucky's end or vice versa, but they were able to hit those big shots to win ugly, win defensively, and then today open things up a little bit more. But to me, it all comes down to the offensive rebounding, because it allows you to play those styles, because now you're controlling the game the way you want to, versus if you're going up against a former UVA defense or a team that's going to get out and run, you can control it a little bit more.
Yeah, it's crazy you mentioned tempo, because this North Carolina team's averaging 81 points a game, which is top third in the country. Which I guess a lot of that is the offensive rebounding numbers that you've mentioned, Sean. It's the fact they're getting more opportunities, and are a little more efficient in the half court, even when they aren't getting runouts, which I still think when Seth Trimble gets back, if you want to see more transition, that's where he's instantly going to change things. One, because that's his style of game, but two, because he's going to create more pressure on the ball, which is going to create more turnovers, in that middle third of the floor, which is going to allow North Carolina to get more runouts that way. Sherrell, I want to ask you, is there anything about this past week that might change your expectations for the rest of the season? I also want a caveat, Sherrell, you've taught me so well about using caveats when we ask these questions on the show, but I also want a caveat. It's just 9 games in, but it is 9 games in. So you tell me, do you have any differences of expectations than maybe you had a month ago?
I mean, that's basically a third of the season, or right at it. I think they have 31 regular season games, so we're a third of the way done already, which is wild. I was pleased with Jonathan Powell this week. And I think we always said, like, hey, if you're not making shots, you got to do something. And he hasn't been making most of his shots. And so he's been doing something. Offensive rebounding. He had a really nice pass. I can't remember which game it was. I think it was Kentucky. They got someone wide open 3. And he had a couple of good defensive possessions as well. Now, it can get frustrating sometimes when, just like Sean said, he's in the corner and he takes a 3 and he's like fading away and his legs are kicking out. That can get frustrating. But if you're going to play, you have to be able to do something else. I do believe the shots for a lot of these guys will come around, simply because there haven't been a lot of shots that weren't open. They're just missing, to me. I'd like to see Adrian Atkinson's data, but they look like they're all lightly contested or open. And that's just a matter of time before those start to go in. So I think if he can come in and be just more than a standstill shooter, that helps a ton. Grab a few rebounds. I think that's helped with the trajectory of the team and how I'm looking at it. And they've just grown without Seth Trimble. I don't think any one of us prior to the season would have said, yeah, they'll win at Rupp and they'll beat Georgetown without Seth Trimble, because you saw what KJ Lewis was doing in the first half, and that's who Trimble would have had. You saw what Owe did in the first half. That's who Trimble would have had. So the fact that they've been able to overcome that has instilled confidence in everyone. I think Corey Alexander said that on broadcast, with Dixon to some degree, and with Evans and with Powell. So when Trimble does come back, you gain a starter, and then you gain a really good player on your bench. So you become instantly deeper in those guys, instead of just being there coming off the bench. They played a ton over the last month. So I think that helps with the trajectory, that they survived these games without Trimble, and now they can move forward with him.
Yeah, I mean, I remember doing the show with you guys as soon as we found out that, Trimble had broken his arm. And we were trying to pump the brakes pretty heavily. I mean, I think Sean may have actually grabbed for the Pullman's brake to slow things down. That's a railroad car reference for all of you old timers in the chat. But I do think that the fact they've been able to win some games, I think the schedule helped them. as they were trying to coalesce with Trimble being out. And like you said, they've had some guys who you didn't expect to do certain things, do those things. And it's helped patch over the gaps that were left when Trimble went out. Um, there's only so much patching you can do, especially when it comes to a bad wardrobe. You need to have good gear. You need to have fresh gear. You need to have a good fit. Your drip needs to be on fleek. You need to have all of the riz. I don't know. I'm out of my depth with these words, but I'm trying because I have middle school and high schoolers in my house. But Johnny T-shirt will take care of you no matter which generation you're from. Johnny T-shirt are longtime supporters of Inside Carolina, of UNC athletics, and of this here show. And if they're supporting this show, that means y'all need to be supporting them. Hit up Johnny T-shirt right now, johnnytshirt.com. I mean, we've got just amount of a few weeks left before Christmas. Get your shopping done, y'all. Johnny T-shirt usually does a 12 days of Christmas thing. I don't know if they're going to do that this year, but my point is, go hit them up. See Johnny T-shirt. Allow them to outfit you. You'll be very, very happy that you did. Johnny T-shirt. Use the premium code on the message boards. Save your extra 10% on top of their amazing prices. All right. For those of you listening to us on the podcast, we appreciate you being a part of the show. Appreciate you putting us into your rotation. Stick around. National ads will drop here. For those of you who joined us, almost the 500 folks that are in the live chat right now on YouTube, hey, just hang around. Nothing changes for y'all. I'm Joey Powell. This is the Coast to Coast podcast for Inside Carolina. Sean Moran is there. Sherrell McMillan is there. Tar Heels blasted Georgetown at home on Sunday after getting a pretty gross win against Kentucky in a game they won 67, 6-7, 6-7, just 6-64 at Rupp Arena. Two big wins against, historical programs. And again, I mentioned in the first segment that I do think Georgetown will probably be a tournament team by the time all is said and done. So, guys, we talked about expectations and whether or not we're changing things for the rest of the season. I'm going to go ahead and get it out of the way now. This next little stretch here, North Carolina has 4 of their 5 games at home. They have the exam break this coming week. Don't play again until Saturday evening against the vaunted insert mascot here of USC Upstate. That USC Upstate right now is 5-5. I'd imagine North Carolina is probably going to be between a 26 and 30-point favorite in that game. So I want to go ahead and ask you guys now, what is it that we want to see from this team? We mentioned, playing minutes changing. We mentioned guys evolving. We mentioned guys developing, secondary skills that they can be relied upon for this squad. Sean, what's priority 1 for you this week as they have at the start of a stretch on Saturday of some home games where they might be able to get better? Really, the only road test they're going to have, or the only test they're going to have in the next little while before the new year, is that road trip to Atlanta to play Ohio State. So, Sean, what's priority 1 for you, man?
Priority 1, almost going back a few weeks when they had the 3 games in a row, but consistency, both offensively and defensively. So to be consistent, need everybody to start gelling, which I think we've seen. I would like to see some of the lineups we saw today, especially while Trimble is still out, in terms of a little more offensive versatility and offensive threats from all aspects. So to me, that goes to Dixon, Evans, Bogovats, Wilson, and Vasar. I still think it's important to try to get Evans going, or to find out what role Evans can be on this team, just given that lack of depth. And I understand Trimble will be coming back and be cutting into certain minutes, but I think in the long run, identifying how Evans can be a productive member of this team is really important. So to me, it goes to playing some of those different lineups, but the consistency where, Georgetown, whether it was UNC's defense or poor shooting, there were some stretches where both teams were pretty poor from the field. So the lead that UNC had was never really threatened, but you play, once you get into ACC play or the tournament, that those leads can evaporate pretty quick. Just remember St. Bonaventure getting up 10 and that was gone in no time. So to me, it's a consistency. How many times can they string 3 possessions in a row of scoring or defensive stops? I think we know what we're going to get from this great front court. So to me, just continue to see Luka continuing to grow up and what he can bring to the table. We'll love to see, Zayden High. We saw the run out in Kentucky, big basket. I think low expectations, but can there just be a few minutes that he is contributing productively, or not harming the team? So I think it's going to be important for him to get a little bit more consistent. So that just goes across the board. More reps is good, especially for a team. Once again, right now is playing. Nobody on this team played together or with each other last year, so it's still relatively new for the group.
Is that layup that High got against Kentucky the most ballyhooed regular season single layup that we've talked about in forever? I mean, it's I hate that for
especially because
but
I felt it was I got excited when I saw him running out, and then as he released it, I got nervous because it felt like it was a little off, and then you saw it bouncing around, and
I thought he was too far to the basket.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was. I didn't know that he had control when he got it, but yeah.
I was screaming, "Know your personnel" in my TV to Caleb Wilson. But hey, props to Zayden for making the layup.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's.
I mean, even the three he took today, I'm fine with that. Not A+ strength, but if he's on the line versus a few feet off, and he's open, I have no issues with that as he learns, trying not to do too much right now.
And Haliafanowo was not anywhere near him when he took that shot. So he's proven, he's proven that he can make them. And I would dare say, if he didn't have somewhat of a greenish light from Hubert Davis, then he probably would have been pulled pretty quickly. I want to see positive things from that position, not just for Zayden High and not just for James Brown, but from that position, because without it, like the minutes those guys are giving so far has just been just useless. Like ashtray on a motorcycle useless. You need those guys to find a way to plug in, and even if it's just running out and forcing his defender to track him down the court and getting open for a full speed layup, I think that counts. Some folks in the chat have said what we've said a couple of times. Hey, just don't hurt the team while you're out there. Don't make things worse. All right, Sherrell, same question for you, man. What's the number one thing that you think should be a priority this coming week during exams and as they start this home stretch against some lesser competition?
I'm gonna go off the board a little bit, but I don't think Seth Trimble is far from returning. And so we forget, even though he's been here for 4 years and they played together during the summer, they've only played 2 halves together or 4 halves together, 2 games. So like, how do you begin to integrate him back into a lineup that's, gotten chemistry over the last couple of weeks? Like, how does he try to fit back in and reestablish himself? So looking at that, that's one thing I want to see. And then in these games against lesser teams, you should strive to have as many possessions as possible because you're more talented and you can just kind of wear them down. So I want to see games with possessions of 75 or more. I think this season there's only been 1 or 2. They've only had 1 game this season. 2 games, Central Arkansas and Radford. Only 2 games where they've had 75 or more possessions. So I want the ball to move quickly up the court and then quickly around it offensively. And then defensively, just continue to kind of keep doing what they're doing, but got to figure out that the points in the paint thing, because it is, I don't know, it's very strange. It's a interesting dichotomy of like 2 really good athletes in the middle of the defense who are limiting from a 2-point perspective one of the best teams defensively, and an effective field goal percentage one of the best teams in the country. But then you see all the points in the paint, and it just, for my brain, it doesn't compute. So I'm going to ask Sean, like, how does that happen? What does that mean?
I don't have the perfect answer for that, but I do feel sometimes the team is, or the guards are shading, their opponent to the basket, maybe a little bit more than they should, saying, "Hey, we have a 7-footer back here. We have an athletic guy," but then they get caught up on, somebody screening them or pinning them, so that all of a sudden they're expecting help, and instead of the Vasar Wilson being there, they're hung up, and now it's an easier shot. So I think sometimes they're almost funneling them to the bigs more than they should in certain situations. But it is interesting because you have the length, you have the athleticism, and to be getting those points in the paint. But I do think sometimes the guards are funneling them a little bit too aggressively to the bigs, and sometimes they get caught up.
I want to also look at
because it was like a layup line against Kentucky. I mean,
For the
I'm not
first half,
misremembering
especially.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
it was bad.
there was a lot of almost kind of like that Olay defense where you're essentially just escorting guys, to the logo, right there at the, inside the free throw line. I also wonder if, and you guys can shoot me down if this is wrong. I also wonder if it was the length and height of these two backcourts that North Carolina has played against. While Georgetown's backcourt isn't that big, they are talented and they are skilled and they are veterans. So I wonder if just having seen a couple of back-to-back, backcourts that were pretty talented and pretty steady groups that were able to get their shot from inside that free throw line. Maybe if that wasn't part of it, but yeah, points in the paint count as or run out baskets also count as points in the paint too, don't they? Somebody asked in the chat. I feel like that's a yes. If you're running out and getting a layup and shooting it under the paint, whether there's somebody around you or not, it's still points in the paint. Fellas, before we get out of here, anybody got anything they want to throw in, or anything you feel like we might have glossed over, Sean?
Just one thing. I think when I'm watching the games, what I get most excited about is when I see Vasar coming up for a high pick and roll. And I think Eric Collins might have mentioned it in the chat, but when I see him, kind of circling up, I get excited just because I feel the guards are confident when they're coming off of that. Both Evans and Dixon have shown they're strong passers, that quick bounce pass, or just being able to hit the pocket as he's rolling. If he catches it, all the attention is paid for him. So now it gives the shooters on either side or cutters on the left or right. So it does really involve all five players, and we'll have to look at the points per possession. But I feel like once Vasar gets it on the move, which goes back to the summer we talked about a lot, trying to get him in these situations. UNC has been very dangerous in those situations. So to me, I just love that play. I know you can't do it every single possession, but when they are running it, it's very, very tough to stop, not just for Vasar, but utilizing the whole team for open looks.
All right, Sherrell, same thing, man.
I'll just go to the recruiting front. We haven't talked recruiting at all. It's just Dylan Mingo in 2026 for UNC at the moment. Hubert Davis, we reported, went and saw him up in New York this past week. And, I think the headline that we had on our story after he visited was that Carolina was in the game. And I still think they are. Joe Tipton kind of said that they're expecting a decision this month. We've heard in the next couple of weeks, by the end of the month, but that decision is coming soon. And, this is my personal opinion. This is not reporting or anything, but I feel like Baylor is kind of falling a little bit. And I think it's going to come down to Carolina and Penn State. Now, obviously, Penn State, like we said, has a ton of advantages. Specifically, his brother is there and playing well for them, even though they're not a great team. But I think Carolina has, again, kind of risen from the ashes in recruitment and put itself in position to win it there at the end. So that's kind of the Dylan Mingo update and where we think things stand right now.
There's a joke in there somewhere about like when the lights come on for last call at a bar and tying that into recruiting. I'm not going to make the joke, but there's something there that I'm not going to flesh out. Either way, man, I'm grateful for both of you guys and what you guys always bring to the show. Hey, for everybody who's listening, everybody that's tuned in live, everybody's listening to us in pod or watching us on YouTube later on. We do this every Sunday during the season at 8:00. Tune it in, put it on your scheduled viewing, treat it the same way that your grandma used to treat days of our lives, right? Just, expect it, plan around it, treat us as one of your stories, and we'll welcome you in with open arms every time we start this show. We appreciate y'all being a part of this, and we hope that we continue to deliver the sort of, value that you've come to expect from inside Carolina and from the coast to coast. But until next time, Tar Heels' next game is next Saturday, as I said, against USC Upstate. It is a home game in the Smith Center. And so we'll have some information on that, but make sure you're just locked into Inside Carolina. If you haven't, make sure you subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff. And you will be back very, very soon. Or we will be back very, very soon to give you more of the goodness that you crave. But for Sherrell McMillan, for Sean Moran, very appreciative of John Siegley for producing and for Johnny T-Shirt for sponsoring. And until next time, this has been the Coast to Coast Podcast. Y'all make it a great week.